because it unfolds, one thing leads to another, then you suddenly see through the light of awareness why the sequence is what it is. So the first niyama is called saucha. Eddie.
Cleanliness. And there are cleanliness. Yeah, there are two types of cleanliness. There's a cleanliness of the body and a cleanliness of the mind. And the cleanliness of the body is doing things like taking a bath and keeping the body clean. And then the cleanliness of the mind is to keep a joyful disposition. And in the sutra it says there's a feeling of pleasantness, a one-pointedness of mind, a calming or subjugation of the being completely deluded by the information coming through the sense organs. And then we become prepared or have a fitness for liberation. So all of this comes from cleanliness of the mind. And then from the cleanliness of the body, what we learn is that our body is always in a state of decay, and it needs to be maintained all the time. Like if you don't brush your teeth for a day, after a day, your breath smells, your teeth begin to get dirty, and the teeth start to decay. So to stave off the decay of the body, you need to keep it clean. That's why you need to brush your teeth and scrape your tongue and take a shower and, brush your skin and clip your nails and all the different things that we do. And so one of the things which is interesting about this, the description of Patanjali with the cleanliness of the body, which is very distinct from how we look at it in the West, is that in the West we think through all this pampering of the body, I'll become beautiful. And therefore, through cleaning myself all the time and taking care of, my beautiful haircut and clipping my nails and doing all the things, I'm going to beautify the body. And then maybe it will last, forever. This is one of the ideas that we have, that by taking care of my body, I will last forever, which is true in certain extents, like with Kaya Kalpa and things like that. But Patanjali says through the taking care of your body so much and all the work that goes into keeping it clean, you start to actually form a little bit of a disgust for your physical body, thinking, I'm more than just this form, which is always going to be in a state of decay. And no matter how much upkeep I do with it, eventually it's going to start to smell and rot away. And so therefore, do not be obsessed with the body as a source of lasting happiness, but see the body as something which is a temporary vehicle to carry you somewhere, hopefully towards liberation, which is already our own essence anyway. And so not only do you begin to feel this sense about your own body, you begin to feel that about the bodies of other people as well, that the beauty that you might assign to someone else and the longing for that beauty that you might have, you can also see, what their body is also going to decay. And it's not a source of lasting happiness. And what we're looking for really is lasting happiness, which is uncaused, which does not have its source in the attainment of anything other than present moment being, the bliss of the inner self. So that's saucha, cleanliness.
Okay,
from
that's very helpful. That's very helpful, and I totally understand every aspect of what you said. Now, my own personal history is that I am kind of, in a way, averse to, even though I'm a physician and I write prescriptions all the time, I personally have never related to, discipline or prescriptive attitudes, especially when it comes to things that appear moral, moral self-righteousness, because I think morality is a byproduct of our connection to our source. So when I see, do this in order to do this, which is, actually in a way, my profession. I write self-help books, and I also promise people what they'll get. But then I realize also that, it's not just that, it's the totality of what we're doing and how it fits in. So when I looked at, saucha, for example, the first thing, having heard your description, it's much more clear. But, I read all these translations, and as you know, Yoga Sutras, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of translations. And most of them are actually very, very prescriptive and rule-oriented and so on. But what I find refreshing in what you're saying right now is that, these days when we hear the word detox, and basically it says keep your body and your mind non-toxic. And we discussed it the other day, ahimsa is the highest non-toxicity you
Right.
can have, right? We discussed that. So listening to saucha as you explained it, and looking at my own experience, especially when you talk about the body decay, and I look at what's happening in our society, people actually don't even take care of their bodies. They put silicone in their bodies, in their breasts. They put all kinds of injections. They put all kinds of artificial substances in their body, which are actually toxins, which is the opposite of cleanliness. So you mentioned the right things: clip your nails, brush your teeth, all of that. And of course, we have panchakarma, which goes along with that. But as I have struggled, and I don't know if this is part of this, even in yoga and Vedanta and all the non-dual traditions, Kashmir Shaivism, Buddhism, especially the Hindu traditions, there are so many schools of thought, so many schools of thought. Dualism, physicalism is there. There's monistic consciousness only, monism, on and on. There are atheistic schools in the Hindu philosophy, agnostic schools, theistic ideologies. But where I have gone through my practice of yoga as a physician, and that what I've discovered is the moment I stop thinking of the body as a physical entity, as a noun, as an object, I had many revelations. And so the first revelation is, which is common, the body is also energy, and then I go look, yogic literature, prana. It's a different word, but it refers to energy, particularly as it pertains to the body, vital energy. The prana is behind breath, it's behind movement, it's behind thought, it's behind everything that's happening in the body. So is the body matter or is it prana? Well, it's both. And then you start going into the subtle body, and you realize that, what we call the mind, which is feelings and emotions and thoughts, are vrittis, right? But so is the body as a perceptual experience. It's a vritti. It's just a fluctuation of perceptions, which are snapshots. Everybody, I look at you, I look there, I look at you, that's another snapshot. And even though I don't see that, when I look at you, look there, look back at you, the snapshot, when I look at you again, is not identical to the snapshot before. I just have to string these selfies along, and then I realize that the body is not a verb, and not a noun, it's a verb, it's a process. And then I also realized the process is vrittis, the same thing that's happening in the mind. It's just vrittis. These are perceptual vrittis. And then I interpret that as a body. So that led me, through the practice of yoga, to look at the body ultimately not as matter, not as energy, not as information, but as consciousness. And then I also realized through my practice of yoga, meditation, that consciousness has no form. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't look at it. And anything that has form, it doesn't matter this object, which is so little, or it could be a period at the end of a sentence, or it could be the Milky Way galaxy. Anything that has form, obviously, is in space and time and is limited. But that which is formless can't be in space and time and must be infinite, right? And what is happening is the body, which is assuming a form, this form is a phenomenon, which is vrittis, and the vrittis are in formless being. And that which is formless is obviously also infinite, right? It's infinite because It has no form. Anything that has a boundary is not, doesn't matter how big, how small. Smaller than the smallest, bigger than the biggest, it's formless, it doesn't have form. Therefore, the form it assumes is the morphing of consciousness into this form. Only the formless can morph. Of course, something that has form can change another form. You can lose weight. Okay, you can even reverse some of the biomarkers of aging. You can stop the decay. But as soon as vritti occurs, entropy starts. And that's what the decay is. And that's okay, because the vritti is actually giving us the experience of form and phenomena and is hinting to us the source, which is formless being. Now, between every thought, between every sensation, between every perception, between every breath, between every movement, between every image in our mind, between every emotion, is the formless being anyway. Right now I'm speaking words, right? Now, of course, a lot of people accuse me of word salad. It means nothing. Now, the real word salad would be if there was no sequential unfoldment of these words, right, into a sentence. If there was no grammar, if there was no syntax, if there was no meaning, if these words, same words I'm using right now, were jumbled, boom, they all came to you, no meaning. But because they're sequenced by the formless, in between every vritti, they create a form and phenomenon that I recognize. And the non-dualists say, when I see myself in the other, that's love. When I see myself in an object, doesn't matter, it could be this object, could be a rainbow, could be the Milky Way galaxy, that's beauty. And we have these expressions, Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. Truth, beauty, and love all go together, right? So to me, saucha is actually understanding that the best purification is to treat your body as a vritti of the divine, as a vritti of the infinite, and see the infinite right now. And the practice of yoga, when we put together sauchas, all the other things, yamas, niyamas, pranayam, pratyahara, you can actually shift vrittis in such a way that you can delay that entropy, you can delay that because that which is formless is not in time. And the more we actually anchor ourselves in the identity of the formless, which is the purpose of yoga, identity is there, then that which takes form automatically becomes pure. So I don't know if this is classic yoga or not, but it is yoga.
Well, yeah, I think that's genius. And a couple comments on that. Number one, that was beautiful. So when you say that the ultimate saucha is to see your body as a vritti of consciousness, and to relate to it that way, that sounds to me like the way that a bhakta or a devotee would approach these yamas and niyamas. And I think that that's really beautiful. And that fits completely in with Patanjali's model, because he said that the highest of all of these yamas and niyamas that we can practice is surrender to God, which we'll get there in a few minutes. And so if we look at all of these practices in the Ashtanga Yoga as practices of devotion, automatically we bypass a lot of problems. And so I think I really like the way you put it. But to me, you sounded like a devotee of the divine, saying my body is a vritti of divinity, of the sacred, or of God, if you believe in God. And in fact, there's a certain strain or branch of non-dual philosophy which is Vishishta Advaita, which says that all is one, and but the manifestation that we live with, all is one, but everything is Vishnu, and this entire manifestation is the body of Vishnu that we are living in, and so therefore the best thing we can do is to live our lives in service to Vishnu, which would mean to see our body as an activity within the divine as well. So I really like that. So we can talk about that more later. And then one other comment I'd like to make is that when you're talking about consciousness and activities in consciousness, the word vritti means an activity. And so just to recap for people, vritti is activity. Chit means consciousness. And chitta is basically like a reflection of consciousness where activities can occur. And so when we see in the second sutra, yogas chitta vritti nirodha, that in our state right now, we have vrittis of activity occurring in chitta, and chitta is the field of awareness where things are occurring. That can be our mind, our emotions, our body, the world around us. But then when we completely restrain or dissolve all the vrittis, all the activities, then all that's left is chit, is consciousness. So chitta vritti means when do we have chitta? When is there a reflection? When there's activities that we're identifying with. But when the activity cease, then chitta ceases, and all that's left over is chit, which is pure being, pure awareness. So in regards to what you were saying before in your commentary on saucha, this fits in with Patanjali's description in the first two sutras as well. So I think it's valid. For me, it works.
Thank you. So let's move on. And I was thinking a lot of things we do right now to beautify the body are actually insulting the body.
Yeah.
In many ways. We think we're paying homage to the beauty of the body, but we're insulting it.
Yeah.
And what you just said reminded me what all yogis treat their body as a holy temple.
Yeah. Striving for 0% body fat, for example, in the fitness thing, 0% or 2% or 4% body fat.
It's insulting the body.
The Buddha tried that. He tried fasting and doing great austerities with his yoga guru, and then he left that and said, this is not the way.
That's it.
Yeah. And can I say one other thing that I'd like you to maybe, and this is one other thing that you spoke about. Sorry, there's a motorcycle going by.
That's fine. That's also vritti.
It is, exactly. Yoga Sutra, Patanjali says that the two purposes of the world are for experience and liberation.
Yes.
And you already said that everything we know of is an experience. Our body is an experience of consciousness.
Yes.
Our mind, our thoughts, everything. So if we can recognize everything as an experience and see that it's just an experience and not identify with it, then that perhaps is the quickest route to liberation.
Yeah, we are liberated. If we just replace the word object with the word experience, that's it. And then say, where is the experience happening? It's happening in me. Therefore, this is in me. Therefore, I'm in love with it.
There you go. That's the devotee's point of view. So then from there, we go to santosha. So this is a good segue.
Second, santosha.
Santosha means contentment. And the sutra says that from being established in contentment is the unsurpassed happiness, unsurpassed joy comes from being established in contentment. And that means that whatever comes your way or whatever doesn't come your way, you're happy and you're grateful. If it comes to you, if it doesn't come to you, you're happy and you're grateful, no matter what. And that's santosha in a nutshell.
That's beautiful, but santosha, again, through our practice of yoga and meditation and all the Raj Yoga disciplines, and Bhakti Yoga is also, you realize that santosha is not something to be achieved. It's there, only camouflaged by the vrittis.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not discovering contentment or peace or reaching there, but just removing the obstacles, the veil of ignorance that is hiding the santosha that is already there. Would you agree with that?
Yes. And I think that a good way of putting it also, because one of the descriptions given in the commentaries is that when you're established in unsurpassed happiness, that's uncaused. That means you don't get that happiness because you get something. You don't get depressed because you lose something. If you don't get something, or if you do get something, you're equally happy. You're equally established in joy. So that means no external cause can make you happy, because then it wouldn't be unsurpassed. It would be a passable happiness. I'm a little happy now, but if I get this other thing, I'm going to be more happy. I don't have this.
Or if I lose it.
Or if I lose it, exactly. So that is a surpassable happiness, comes from objects, and unsurpassable happiness comes from not being bound by objects, which is our true nature is not bound by anything. So.
Yeah, my guru used to say, happiness for a reason is a form of misery, but happiness for no reason is joy. Ananda.
That's santosha.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to tapas.
Well, okay, so tapas, this is an interesting word. It means to cook. It means fire. And those are the two definitions of it. And so basically...
Transformation maybe? Fire.
Well, from fire comes... No, you can pipe in. That's
you should stay with the strict interpretation. I would like that, because we want to at least be aware of what the interpretation.
From fire comes transformation. That's the only thing. So from tapas, according to Yoga Sutra, impurities are destroyed, and there comes about a quote unquote perfection of the body and the organs, meaning the sense organs, and as well perhaps the physical organs of the body, but mainly he's talking about sense organs. So quite often tapas is looked at as austerity, as discipline, following some disciplined practices that you do, because when you do some type of a disciplined practice, usually there's a point where it's a little bit uncomfortable. An asana might be hard to stay in. Your legs might start to hurt when you're meditating. Your mind might start to wander. Or whatever kind of discipline you're doing, at a certain point, it's going to become challenging. And at that challenging point is where the yoga practice begins. So when everything is good and easy, yoga is not really occurring. When things get a little challenging, then our yoga begins, and we learned how to deal with the challenge with a calm mind. So Swami Hariharananda says that tapas is the physical austerities or disciplines that you have that you do without causing a pathological disturbance in your mind. So it's challenging, it can be hard, but it doesn't cause, and this is exactly his words, a pathological disturbance, which means you keep your mind calm. So what are going to be those austerities? They can be asanas, pranayama, but also yama is all of the yamas: non-violence, honesty, non-stealing, sexual responsibility, and non-greediness. All of these are tapas because they're a restraint of some type. And at some point, trying to perform those might be a challenge for you. And therefore, they will heat you up. And in that heat, when you sit with it, change occurs. So this is again from the Patanjalian perspective. And also, I don't want to say too much about fire and transformation because you're going to speak about that. But I will say one thing: fire is always considered to be the most mystic of all of the elements because it always burns up. If you have water and you let go of it, it falls downward. The earth is going to fall down. Air goes wherever it wants to. Space is the container of everything. So it's hard to work with space. But fire, if you light a match, you hold the match up, the fire burns up. But if you turn the match down, the fire will still burn up the other way. So fire is always reaching towards the highest. And that's why it's one of the most mystical, as well as being the reason that we can see form, sight in the eyes, digestion in the digestive system, the Jatara Agni, the spiritual fire. All of these fires are the things that are our impulse to move towards the divine.
Very interesting. So, who is in mythology? Who's the son of Surya? Is it Arjuna? Yes, I forget now. But the sun brings the energy, and then we direct the energy back. We are, in a way, exchanging in these havans and yagyas,
Yeah.
this exchange of energy between the universe and us, right?
Oh, yes.
It's beautiful. So again, on tapas, in my experience, and I'm not a scholar like you are. My experience of tapas was just breaking habitual patterns of thinking, feeling, and behavior and speaking. And what I found was that was not easy till I started to do the asanas and the pranayam and the pratyahara, because now I was not actually doing those things automatically broke those habitual habits. So for me, tapas starts with breaking just habits that are keeping you away from truth.
Nice.
Okay.
Very nice.
What is Swadhyaya?
Swadhyaya. This is
Swadhyaya.
Swadhyayana, to move firmly towards oneself. Swadhyaya. So there are a couple of different derivations. One is a Swadhyayana, to move firmly towards oneself. Another is the Swadhyaya. Swa means one's own, and Adhyaya means chapters, things that you study. So Swadhyaya traditionally is used as the repetition of mantras or the repetition of whatever your family portion of the Vedas might be. So for the Brahmins, they all come from a particular lineage, a particular rishi, and there's an Upanishad associated with their line. And there, with that Upanishad, there'll be certain sections or the full Upanishads which are considered to be sort of their lineage text. And the repetition of that every day would be doing Swadhyaya.
So,
And so I don't know if it's only for Brahmins or if it's for other of the Varna ashramas as well. So repetition of mantra can be a personal mantra, because through the perfection of Swadhyaya becomes union or sameness with your Ishtadevata, with your chosen deity. So Ishtadevata samprayogaha is the sameness with your chosen deity comes from the repetition of mantra. And now, of course, the later definitions were things like self-investigation, self-study, self-inquiry, but earlier translations or earlier meanings, let's not say translations, earlier meanings, were always about these repetitions of mantras. And so when you look at the Upanishads, and you look at all the different chapters of the Upanishads and in the different suktas and mantras of the Vedas, what are they about? They're about the self. They're about attaining self-knowledge. So through the repetition of these mantras of the Vedas and Upanishads, you're basically reciting all of the mantras that pertain to how can I know who I truly am? How can I know the nature of consciousness, if there is a nature of consciousness, the nature of the world, the nature of being, and the relationship between all of those. So this is what the repetition of mantras does. My teacher used to repeat the Taittiriya Upanishad every day. And when I used to come to his house when I lived in India, early in the morning at around 4:30 in the morning or so, he would be chanting this Upanishad. And he'd be walking through his house, doing all the things that he did every day. And but they were timed so well that every time he got to open the shutters in his office and unfold the chairs and then go downstairs and reset the clock and then walk into the next room to make his coffee, he was at the same mantra every time he got to each of those places in his house every day. So it's like I saw him kind of setting up his day and the rhythm of his day to the rhythm of these mantras. And that was a really fascinating thing to me, that like he was kind of aligning the activities of his day with the repetition of mantra. And I found that to be really, that was one of the things that led me to want to learn how to chant all of these things.
so again, that's very useful, very, very useful, because I have now been using mantras for 45 years. And just so you know, my lineage is Agastya. Agastya, one of the 7 rishis.
Yes.
And Agastya was, I'm told, actually Vyasa's grandfather or something like that. And Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata or dictated the Mahabharata in Ramayana to Ganesh. So I like the romance of the lineage.
Yes, definitely.
But the mantras also are coded in the, is it the Yajurveda, that there's the body of literature that has all the mantras. And when I started my mantra practice 45 years ago, I didn't get it totally. Why does a mantra work? And of course, I read about it, etc. But for me, it was a revelation because I found myself. And by the way, I do the same thing that your guru did. And when I get up in the morning after I've downloaded whatever thoughts I have, I walk around the house, and every location in the house, I have a mantra for it. But even for every asana, I have a mantra that I've done for years and years. It's only getting better now. But I've been doing mantras with asanas, with pranayam, with everything. I do mantras, and I have, of course, selected mantras, and many mantras were transmitted to me by my guru, but also by Trigunaji, the great Ayurvedic scholar. And I remember each transmission of the mantra that I got over 45 years. But my initial experience, and then I got to understand it, because the Buddhists call the physical body the karmic body. And it's a very beautiful term because actually our physical body is, in fact, our personal story. We metabolize every experience that comes our way, make a molecule out of it. You have an angry experience, you make adrenaline out of it. You have a loving experience, you make oxytocin out of it, or whatever. But every experience actually leaves an imprint on the body. So therefore, this is the karmic body. It's the reflection of our internal dialogue. So when I close my eyes and start to meditate with the mantra, first my internal dialogue is coming up. And that my teacher said, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, that's the upward stroke of meditation. Because when you're alive, vrittis are going to happen. Vrittis is consciousness is only one business, to be conscious, to have experience. That's the business that consciousness is in, to manufacture vrittis as experience. So when you close your eyes, you start meditating, the vrittis are going to come. That's your internal dialogue. It's also your karmic body. Now you take a mantra, and of course, Bij mantras, most people who practice Bij mantras, which are, we know the Bij mantras, they're all over the literature. They don't know the meaning. Most people don't know the meaning of the mantra, but it's connected to some deity, right? The Bij mantra is connected to deity. So in the seed of the mantra is a divine intention, whatever it is. Mahalakshmi mantra, Saraswati mantra, Vishnu mantra, Ganesh mantra, all the things you do. But in the seed mantras is embedded the intention of the divine, one aspect of the divine, one theme. Could be abundance, Lakshmi, could be knowledge, Saraswati, could be creation, Brahma, could be destruction of ignorance, Durga, or whatever. And there are mantras around these so-called deities, which are basically symbolic representations of the infinite divine. And you're chanting these mantras, maybe loudly, as in the rituals, but also silently. They're taking your attention away from the karmic history, which is creating this thing, and they're moving it back in the direction of the infinite, even though you don't know it, because it's subconscious. The seed sound contains the intention of the divine. Even you may not know it. If you know it, that's fine too. But maybe it's better that you don't know it, because then you don't expect, oh, I'm suddenly going to become the embodiment of Ganesh or Shiva or whatever. You don't know, it's fine, but the intention is embedded, subtle. It has been embedded for thousands of years, right? So to practice a mantra that has been used for thousands of years is like a path that is trodden. And you keep, instead of finding your own path, you take a path that is already trodden. Furthermore, it takes you away from your karmic history and your vrittis that are creating the whatever karma, as the body is the karma. The body is the recycling of karma. That's all it is. The body is your story. Every wisp of experience that has come your way, you have metabolized it into this body. Now, you practice the mantra, you're moving away from the history in the direction of the infinite source, the divine source. But there's another thing that happens when you practice mantra, at least to me, with seed mantras. There are moments that there's no mantra and there's no thought. And you are in the transcendent. So the mantra has many purposes. First, it takes you away from the baggage of the story you're telling yourself all the time, all your recycled responses and reactions to the world. It's taking you away. It's taking you in the direction of the infinite divine. But once in a while, mantra and thought all cancel, and you're right at the source. So yeah, mantra is amazing. And it is totally not understood in the West. Totally. Even though it's now become part of our vocabulary, I can go look at the English dictionary, type out mantra, I get many definitions. Mantra, man means mind. Tra, to me, means an instrument of the mind that takes us beyond the mind, that takes us beyond the karmic body, beyond the karmic recycling of sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts that serve no purpose other than recycling the stale old stories. So I'm totally so bewildered and so wonderstruck by the power of mantra that I've made this my mission, that mantra is my key to shifting my patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, and behaving in this world. Even if I get into an argument, instead of getting into the argument, I invoke a mantra. And immediately the tension is gone. Any comment?
Yeah, bunch of comments. So that was super. I'll work backwards. Mantra comes from, as you said, two words, manas, which means mind, that which, and manas comes from the verbal root ma, which means that which measures. So the manas is that which is measuring, quantifying, whether it's the sensations, information, feeling, and thought acronym SIFT of Daniel Siegel. And so that's what the mind does. It measures. And tra is from trayate, like you said, which can have two meanings. One, to protect, or two, to cross over. So mantra is that which protects us or helps us cross over the measuring field that we identify with. So that's mantra. And I love how you brought up this idea of the ancient source of mantras, that the mantras came from the rishis, like Agastya, who, for people who don't know of Agastya Muni, he was 4 feet tall and 4 feet wide, and a ferocious Muni. And Vishwamitra, who heard the Gayatri mantra. And all of the rishis heard the mantras deep, deep in their meditations. And where did they hear them? They heard them in that space that you were talking about, where everything disappears, which is the field of potential. And in that field of potential, everything exists in a resting form that rises up. And it rose up from within them in the form of mantras that they didn't see, but they heard. And so the Western way that Rishi is translated is a seer, but in Sanskrit, it actually is a hearer. So these are the hearers of the sacred mantras, which were infinite and eternal, but we're just resting in this primordial form, waiting to be revealed to the world. So when we chant them, like you said, we are tying ourselves back to exactly the infinite. So that's one very powerful thing about them. And I remember when I was first learning mantras, when I was at Shivananda Yoga Vedanta centers, I remember we would chant Om Namo Narayanaya every day for half an hour for world peace. And when I was in India first doing this for half an hour every evening, I felt, wow, there have been yogis and rishis and saints chanting this mantra for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And by chanting it, we're joining into the collective power that they've created through keeping these mantras alive. And I remember the first time I went to India, Lex Hickson, I think you knew Lex Hickson. He was a very dear friend and a great yogi. He was a disciple of Swami Nikhilananda, who was a direct disciple of Sharda Devi, Ramakrishna's wife. And he said to me, whenever you go to India, take every initiation that you can. Anyone who wants to give you an initiation and you feel they're a valid source, take that initiation, because you will enter into the karmic stream of knowledge, which is India. And with every initiation, you'll keep entering into that karmic stream. And that will start to take you in a new direction. And so he said that's the importance of initiation. And puja, which is the Sanskrit word for ritual or worship, also comes from two root words. One is pu, which means that which has been previous, that which occurred earlier. And ja is birth, or to be born. So puja is purification of karma through the activity of worship, and you're doing the worship with your physical body. So puja is not only to worship the divine, but it's also to purify karma, the karma of your physical body, of the karmic body, which every time we perform an action, and that action leaves an imprint on our mind, on the emotions, on the nervous system, on the physical body, that becomes a new karmic predicament for us that we're going to have to deal with. So through doing these sacred actions, through walking through your house every day like you're doing, saying your mantras in particular places, and doing an asana, and saying your mantras in those particular asanas, you are actually creating this new karmic imprint, like you said, which is a karmic imprint which is leading you in that stream towards being, rather than the constant change of doing and the subsequent results of that constant doing that we have to pay for later on in our lives at some point. So that's my comment on what you had to say about Swadhyaya.
You brought it up to two things to my mind. The mantras were heard. That's called Shruti, and then they were remembered. It's called Smriti. Can you explain those two words?
Well, I think you could probably do a better job of this one than I can, but I'll give it a short shot. So we have the Shruti, which are the Vedas. The Vedas were heard. These are mantras which were not written by any person. And then we have the Smritis, which are the stories which are told about things that occurred. And this is the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the stories of Krishna that were experienced and then remembered and then told. And the story of Ram getting exiled to the forest with Sita and Lakshmana and how they met Hanuman. And all these stories were told and remembered and passed on. So these are a category of something called the itihasas. Yeah, once upon a time. Itihasa, once upon a time.
Got it. Okay, we come to the fifth. Is it fifth? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, Ishvara Pranidhana. Let's talk about that, and then let's see what it means.
Okay, so Ishvara is the Lord or the divine or God, and Pranidhana means to lay oneself out completely flat in front of, to completely lay oneself in front of. So this is traditionally translated as surrender to God or surrender to the divine. Ishvara is spoken of later in Yoga Sutras, and we'll get to Ishvara further on, about the significance of what Ishvara actually is. And briefly, the teacher of the ancients, existing before time, embodied in the sound of Om, and some other things that we'll cover later. My Sanskrit teacher, Vyas Houston, defined Ishvara Pranidhana as the perfect alignment of your attention with the seer within. And that was his description of Ishvara Pranidhana. So for those who are not devotional or they don't believe in God, then okay, that's fine. You can also have this perfect alignment of your attention with the seer within. And that was his definition.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So again, for those of you who are listening to us or watching us right now, you are a traditional atheist, you don't believe in a personal or impersonal God. Everyone agrees on one thing, whether they're atheists, scientists, philosophers, or other thinkers, philosophers, but even us practicing yogis. Whatever the ground state of the universe is, whatever it is, quantum vacuum, Chitakash, Allah, Ein Sof, Brahman, Atman, whatever the ground state is, it is formless. That everyone agrees. The quantum vacuum has no form. And actually, the rishis had even a better kind of idea of this. They use the word Chitakash, the infinite space of consciousness. But Chitakash is not the quantum vacuum, because the quantum vacuum still has what are called, still has fluctuations. They're called virtual particles, on and on. But if you took away every object, let's say you took away every object, including your body, theoretically, imagine that, then even space-time would disappear. There would be no space-time. Space-time requires the presence of perceptual objects and a perceiver. But if you take out everything, even space-time disappears. So quantum vacuum is not Chitakash. Chitakash is even beyond that. But whatever the source is, has no form. It's infinite. Being infinite, it has infinite possibilities, okay, for expressing itself as infinite thoughts, infinite creativity, infinite love, infinite anything, infinite experience of any kind, divine, diabolical. The whole thing is there. If it's infinite, nothing is left out. So planting an intention, a sankalpa, I think of that as a prayer. And then surrendering is diving into the field of infinite possibilities and trusting the infinite organizing power of consciousness to fulfill the outcome of that sankalpa or that intention. Right now, for example, I'm speaking sequential unfoldment of words. I'm not thinking of the grammar, the syntax, or anything like that. I'm just expressing myself without anticipation, without regret, without resistance, right now, from the deepest level of, what would I say, sincerity, authenticity, integrity. And if you have that, because if you're doing mantra practice, because you're doing yogasana, because of all the other practices, then the prayer or the surrender or the sankalpa or the intention fulfills its own organized outcome without the intervention of thought, without the intervention of anticipation, regrets, resistance. Today, I call that synchronicity. Religious people call it the state of grace. Atheists call it good luck. Some people say, I happen to be in the right place at the right time. And some religious people say, God is taking care of me. But it's all the same thing. It's trusting the infinite in you. And that is Ishvara Pranidhana.
Beautiful. So there are a few important things there then. There's this idea, number one, of trust. There is the letting go of fear or anxiety of, that thing that you might be wanting or striving for or worrying about. So there's trust, there's letting go of fear, and then there's the offering, which is the letting go. Because after you offer something, then you let go of it. You don't hold on to the gift after you've given it. anymore. You want that person to enjoy it. So an offering, a pure offering, means that after you've given it, you have let it go for the joy of the being that you've given it to. So that's a type of surrender, but a letting go might be, with the offering is nice. So those are three components that you talked about of Ishvara Pranidhana that could really help us experience life lightly, knowing that we can't control what life is going to bring us. And we already know that there's a certain amount of control we can have towards how we respond to what life brings us. But if we can have some little help of a format of how we could respond to it, that might help us a little bit. So when you talk about this trusting, the organizing capacity of the universe, and the letting go of fear of what might come or what might not come. And in the letting go of the fear, there's the letting go of anxiety, and the body can tap into the relaxation response rather than, the stress response. And then last, the letting go of the offering of your intention. And so the intention is that thing that we are offering. And so with the offering of the intention, which is also our deepest desire, we're even letting go of demanding an outcome of our deepest desire. And so that's a very beautiful way of describing what it means to let go, what it means to surrender. It's a different dimension. Because often we don't know when we hear surrender to the Lord or surrender your actions. What do you mean? What am I surrendering? My action's not a physical thing. So that was a really beautiful description of Ishvara Pranidhana that you just gave. I like that a lot.
Well, we've covered a lot today, and I think we could easily give a post-modern title to our talk. So let's say today, detoxing body, mind, finding contentment, and the magic of mantras. How's that for this talk?
I'm a big fan of long titles, so that works quite well for me.
Or we can change it. Contentment, purity, and the magic of mantras.
That sounds good.
And the magic of mantras. That's a promise. Mantras are magical. They've changed my life.
Yeah.
So calendar there,